Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome in here to Rover Sports. Let's see if I have my headphones, which I might have. Yo guys, yep, we are officially live. A little bit of a recap to tonight. What an epic fight between Mason Rudolph. An epic fight between Rudolph and Miles Garrett. This is the best thing to happen for Mason Rudolph, because I'll tell you guys, Mason Rudolph, I'll tell y'all, it's the best thing to happen to Rudolph because he sucked tonight. He was not good. He's a second round pick. He isn't a franchise quarterback. The Steelers desperately need Big Ben to come back. And I think that Rudolph did when you watch the tape, like Rudolph's a quarterback, so he's a little guy, or he is 6'5", but he went at Miles Garrett first. That's unequivocal, but Garrett also, by taking him down, inspired it. And I do feel a little bit of sympathy, crazily, for Garrett, but at the same time, you just got to use better judgment. He's going to be suspended, but he's going to – listen, this season didn't matter anyway for Cleveland. It's not like Cleveland's going to win every single game. You have the Bills. You have Pittsburgh again in a couple of weeks. And the Steelers are going to have better quarterback play in Pittsburgh. And it's not like the Browns are going to get to the playoffs. So, Miles Garrett reminds me of Ndamukong Suh a little bit in the fact that both guys are really smart guys. Both guys off the field are completely different than their personas on the field. Garrett's a piano player. Garrett, has a high IQ. He has a great vocabulary. He's really smart. A great interview. But at the same time, there's just something in him that causes him to do this harm. And I know that there was a TMZ controversy, but now this game has completely been overshadowed by Miles Garrett and his stupidity. Really, Freddie Kitchens kept the Steelers in the game. Just so many running calls. He didn't unleash Baker Mayfield. And Mason Rudolph is a backup quarterback. And sometimes backups are going to have awful games. The Steelers couldn't establish a running game to save their life. I thought that their play caller was absolutely awful. I think his name might have been Brian Flinchner or whatever. The Steelers' play calling was like the worst I've ever seen it from anybody. On 3rd and 1, they're doing 50-yard bombs. And Tomlin's not an offensive coach, but I got to give credit to Steven Nelson. He was amazing tonight. And that Watt kid is unbelievable. And Mason Rudolph, he is a gamer. He's going to get in the face of other players. And, that was just a crazy brawl kind of at the end of a football game. But it's the best thing to happen to Rudolph because now nobody is talking about Rudolph and how shitty Mason Rudolph played all night long. There's no defending Miles Garrett for the swinging of the helmet. It was a terrible lapse. It was terrible judgment. It's rare that something like that would happen, at the end of a game like that. His emotions caught up with him. Nobody's a perfect person, but he's gonna suffer the consequences. And Mason Rudolph, he lost the game. Mason Rudolph talking smack to Miles Garrett, a division game. And Mason Rudolph got in the head of Miles Garrett and got him suspended. I don't know if Mason did that on purpose, but I think that Mason Rudolph, this is going to be the most famous moment from his career because Baker Mayfield owns Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph at Oklahoma State was 0-3 against Baker Mayfield, and now in the NFL, Baker Mayfield once again tonight shining under the bright lights of this game. And he was all right. But Mason Rudolph, the offensive coordinator put him in position to fail, but he's nowhere near Gardner Minshew now. He's nowhere near Kyle Allen. He makes Kyle Allen look like a Joe Montana. Mason Rudolph, he makes Kyle Allen look like Brady, look like Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas. That's how bad Mason Rudolph is because he can't throw a ball with any kind of velocity on it. He can't read a defense. He's not mobile at all. He's a sitting duck. and the punt, of course, to Duck Hodges. I think that the Browns and Freddie Kitchens, really disappointing for him. I actually thought that the ejection, I mean, what a dirty hit, though, by Demarius Randall on a defenseless Deontay Johnson down the left sideline. I mean, he launched his head at him. Guy dropped the football. And that was even worse, I think. That could have even been worse than what Miles did. Well, what Miles did that was bad was the helmet slam. But if he never got a hold of the helmet, it would have never happened. It's all happening within 5 seconds. You know, it's all just an emotional response. But in a nationally televised game like this, it's going to be brutal. If I were the NFL, I would think about 4, or I would think about 6. But in terms of awfulness, I mean, I could understand why Garrett did it. The guy was provoking him. He's 6'5". He's trying to tear the helmet off of Mason Rudolph. And obviously some bad words are being said. But at the same time, it's a learning experience for a guy that's 25 years old or so. But it's an instant reaction thing. I thought Buck and Aikman too. Like, it's not the biggest deal in the world. Like, I don't know. I mean, for Mason Rudolph, it could have been. It could have been really, really dangerous. But thankfully, thank God, he's actually okay. So, hopefully, we could just move on and talk about how shitty Mason was on the field. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. It's one of the greatest fights in the history of this game. I mean, there's no doubt about it. For the Steelers, it's very disappointing because you have the defense that's able to compete for a wild card position, and your offensive coordinator sucks, and it's the same problems we kind of have with Mike Tomlin and all game long when you're down 14 and, I know that you don't. The Steelers fought Mason Rudolph 6'5", like he's gonna replace Big Ben Roethlisberger. He's smart. He can speak well. He can throw. He has decent arm strength, but his arm strength's really not good. He doesn't have great touch. He has a terrible feel for the pocket. He's immobile, which is, he's a dinosaur for this age of quarterback. And you just can't win with a guy who's completely immobile. It's the same reason I think Joe Burrow could end up like a Mason Rudolph. I think that those two are very comparable. But you got to be mobile. Even Matt Ryan has trouble in this NFL. You see Eli and Phillip have the same problems. And, tonight there was no running game whatsoever. The Browns defense, like Josh Allen, was even having so much more success. And the Browns, I mean, Mack Wilson was a good pick, but the Browns have no culture whatsoever. I mean, they had a lot of dirty hits out there on the field. Even Kareem Hunt was getting into it with T.J. Watt. The game was out of control. And Freddie Kitchens has zero control, and it's not just Freddie's fault. I mean, John Dorsey also brought in a guy in Jordan Whitehead, I don't even know. It's one kind of Whitehead, and you guys know what happened. He threatened to beat the shit out of somebody on social media, which is even dumber, I mean, after the game. I mean, Miles Garrett, guys, wrestling. If anybody's ever gotten in a fight, you know that in a fight it's hard to think. It's hard to process. But, going on social media just as stupid, and you've seen guys get kicked out of the NFL for things like this, and I'll tell you what, in Ndamukong Suh, I don't think that any of his issues, really add up to the fact of this tonight. I don't think Ndamukong Suh adds up to this tonight. And Freddie Kitchens, no discipline, weird mix of run and pass, was a running back coach forever, and the more you watch the guy, the more that Freddie is probably not going to be a head coach, and it mostly goes to discipline, but it's also John Dorsey. John Dorsey, there's a reason that he doesn't stick anywhere. It's because he does not have any foresight. He doesn't know how people react. He doesn't know how to put together a cohesive team whatsoever. And the Browns are a mess. What are they now? They're 4-6. they're still going to miss the playoffs. And their defense is all right. But they're a very mediocre team. And in the AFC, the fact that you're 4-6, you lost to Brandon Allen, you lost to you lost to Seattle. You had chances to win a lot of these games, and you couldn't pull it out. But disappointing for the Steelers because tonight was a huge game because Pittsburgh, they needed to go like 10-6, and they're 5-5 now, and their defense is going to bounce back. But they could have went streaking, and that's what's so sad about this Mason Rudolph game. And the reason why they don't play Ducky Hodges is because the Pittsburgh Steelers brass, they wanted to see, they really thought Mason Rudolph could be this franchise, quarterback after Big Ben. I mean, if you listen to everything that they're saying. And I don't think the Steelers really regret the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. And ironically, you're going to have the Dolphins select Tua. The Bengals are probably going to go and select Joe Burrow. And I think that Joe Burrow is a lot worse than Jacob Eason. I think he's a lot worse than Justin Herbert. So the Steelers might have been able to get Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then they might be able to trade a future first-rounder, maybe to a team like the Giants, maybe to a team like the Jets, the Arizona Cardinals that already have a quarterback, and they might be able to go out and get Herbert or Eason anyway in the draft process. Even if Pittsburgh is a wild card, they lose in the first round of the playoffs because their quarterback is probably not good enough to win a road game. And I think Pittsburgh still has Baltimore left. But I could still see the Steelers going 10-6. They're not going to start Ducky Hodges. I thought Mason was doing all right. Tonight you see he's not the answer going forward. But he's a backup quarterback. And in the second round, you have Christian Hackenberg. When you're drafting a guy in the second round, I think he was the 6th quarterback taken in that draft 2 years ago. It's not the worst crime in the world. I think that Garrett will come back next year. Okay, I think it was a reactionary thing. It's a terrible thing. He'll get suspended for the rest of this year. There's no doubt about it. But it was a terrible thing. It was very dangerous for Mason Rudolph. It was a melee. Garrett was getting kicked in the head. And Mason Rudolph now with his helmet, this is now twice that the guy has really put himself in danger. And I'm not excusing Garrett at all. But I'm just telling you guys what can happen in an NFL pile. But for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this was an atrocious game all the way. Any way you slice it, it was abysmal in every aspect. The Browns gave them every chance to win a football game. And craziness ensues in Cleveland, Ohio. So a lot of you guys are saying he should be suspended, never allowed in the NFL again. It just shows you guys like Antonio Callaway can get suspended for 10 games, and Josh Gordon can be suspended for smoking pot, and Miles Garrett's really coming at somebody. So this is a rough situation for Roger Goodell. It's a shame it happened right as the game was ending. And really, it's just the brutality of this game. It gets into people's heads, and Miles just had an ultimate brain lapse. And you gave Miles, a guy who was emotionally really charged up, you gave him the helmet, and he had 2 seconds to decide to do the right thing, and he completely did the wrong thing. And I think actually Garrett's going to learn from this in the long run. He'll be back next season. Thankfully, Rudolph seems to be all right. Could have been a lot worse. And when the player's defenseless, even if Rudolph swung his helmet at Miles Garrett, it's an ugly, ugly situation. This Browns team is going to fall apart now if they haven't already. What was a really nice win by the defense is now going to be nullified really by this fight that ended at the end of the game. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. Going to review some tape on Buffalo and an unfortunate situation. Unfortunately, you wish you could joke around about this stuff, but the more you think about it, the more dangerous that this thing really became. Pittsburgh goes down tonight. Offense was terrible. Mason Rudolph now will be remembered as the victim. Instead of just playing a horrible, horrible football game, he will now be the victim. He won't be talked about tomorrow in this light. So if Mason Rudolph, if he's okay, he actually wins in this scenario, because people are not talking about how terrible he is. They're talking about one of the craziest assaults at the end of the game, one of the craziest in-game fights that you'll really see. And it was wild. I don't know what fight could equal up to this fight. I bet Ndamukong Suh maybe stepping on Stafford's hands maybe qualifies. I would say the Suh stuff qualifies. Maybe Jalen Ramsey versus A.J. Green, maybe Odell and Norman, but I would say maybe A.J. Green and Jalen Ramsey would probably be the one. Maybe Leonard Fournette versus the Buffalo Bills, if I had to think of a fight breaking out, but this was a melee. And swinging at a guy, defenseless helmet, captured right on the national audience like that, with social media, is going to be brutal for Miles Garrett. And I think it should be at least a 4-game. It's probably going to be the rest of his season. And Garrett is smart enough to know better. Knowing Garrett's background, knowing how intellectual he can be off the field, if he can translate that to emotional football, Miles, he'll be okay in the long run. So he's a smart kid, but nevertheless, I mean, there's no excusing what Miles did on the field tonight, and it's disappointing for a kid that does have IQ to make that type of decision, and it's disappointing he's going to miss the rest of the year, but he's young, and he has an opportunity to still become a face of this league, to still be the Hall of Fame player that he is on his track to be, if he does decide to wise up and learn. I know people will never forgive Miles Garrett. I try to be a pretty forgiving guy. It is a very unfortunate and difficult situation. And tonight we learned that Mason Rudolph is not the answer in Pittsburgh, that Pittsburgh has a wild card cap on them, that Tomlin still did a tremendous job, that Bush and Fitzpatrick and T.J. Watt and Sutton and Steven Nelson, I was very impressed by their defense tonight. They only gave up maybe one big play the entire game to Beckham. Baker Mayfield, good throw in the back of the end zone, made timely plays. It was ball control. When you're playing against Mason Rudolph, you're not forced to go and be that aggressive. So the Browns got to win, but eventually Freddie Kitchens has got to attack more because he survived tonight. If the Steelers maybe found a way to tie up that game, I think Cleveland would have found a way to lose that football game. So once again, it comes down to Cleveland. It comes down to being aggressive, making play calls. And I'm sure you have Todd Monken there, Stefanski. It's a risk whatever direction the Browns choose to go. So even though Freddie Kitchens is not that great of a coach, I mean, who other than Lincoln Riley is going to come in there and be a massive upgrade? You're probably not going to get a stud to come work with Jimmy Haslam based on his past. You're probably not going to get your best option to work with a John Dorsey, with the revolving door of Cleveland, with all the drama surrounding all of its players. Now you add Miles Garrett to the drama. You're not, what amazing coach are you going to get? And you're paying Freddie Kitchens a ton of money, so from an ownership perspective, they don't just want to have dead money on a head football coach. So that's how I view it, guys. Thanks for watching the video. I'll be doing a much lighter topic later on. We'll be doing Josh Allen tonight. It'll be fun versus these same Cleveland Browns. Wild night in the NFL.